Welcome to English Buzz!
Your daily news update starts right now.
Welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. And if you are joining us today to practice your English while staying updated on the biggest, most complex global news stories, I just want to say a huge welcome.
You have definitely found the right place.
Grab your coffee, grab your breakfast, because today we're having a really high energy, totally casual, but incredibly deep conversation about the state of our world.
And for all of our B2 English learners out there listening, we want to make a promise right at the top.
Yes, a very important promise.
We are going to tackle some massive, complicated topics today. I mean, from astrophysics to global economics. But we are going to do it using clear, accessible language.
Right. No confusing jargon.
Exactly.
Right.
When we introduce a complex term, we're going to explain exactly what it means through context. The goal here is for you to practice your listening skills without, ever feeling lost.
We want this to feel like you were just sitting at the table with us, having breakfast, figuring the world out, and looking at the stack of sources we have for today's deep dive. I have to admit, the world takes a lot of figuring out right now.
It really does. It's a complicated place.
On the surface, our topics today seem like completely disconnected. We have space exploration, the mechanics of airplane Wi-Fi, the massive migration of tech companies, artificial intelligence.
Not to mention billionaire wealth,
right.
global climate protests, and high-stakes Middle Eastern diplomacy.
Right. It sounds like we just threw darts at a board of global headlines.
That does sound random at first.
Yeah.
But that is where the analysis comes in. Because if you look closely at these sources, they aren't disconnected at all.
No.
Not at all. There is a deeply powerful narrative through line connecting every single one of these stories.
Okay, I love a good through line. What is it?
It is the immense stretching tension between humanity's rapid technological progress and the grounding, undeniable physical realities of our world.
The tension between the digital and the physical.
Exactly. We are currently living in an era where we are aggressively pushing the boundaries of what is possible, right? Whether that is in the physical sky or in the digital landscape.
But we are still tethered to the Earth.
We are. We still have to deal with the heavy, real-world consequences of all this progress.
I love that framework. And listener, before we jump in, I want to make sure you know that you are an active participant in this deep dive. Throughout our conversation today, I'm going to be turning to you and asking you several direct questions. We want to hear your perspectives, your choices, and your reactions.
So get ready to drop your answers in the comments as we go along. Active listening is honestly the best way to learn a language.
It really is. And seeing the diverse perspectives of a global audience always makes these discussions so much richer.
It's the best part.
So let's start by looking up, way, way up. We are going to start our journey today by talking about escaping the Earth entirely.
The ultimate frontier.
Right. And then, in a very strange twist of irony, we'll talk about trying to escape the digital disconnect up in the clouds.
Let's talk about Artemis.
Yes. Our sources point us to a massive historic event currently on the horizon, which is NASA's Artemis II moon mission. And just the raw facts of this are staggering.
They absolutely are. So the plan, as outlined in the current mission parameters, is to send 4 astronauts on an approximately 10-day journey.
10 days in a tiny capsule.
Yeah. They are going to launch from Earth, fly all the way to the moon, orbit around it, and then make the incredibly dangerous re-entry back down to Earth.
4 human beings, locked inside a highly pressurized capsule, flying hundreds of thousands of miles away from any possibility of immediate rescue.
It's wild to think about.
And the context here is what makes this so incredibly monumental. This isn't just like routine space travel.
No, I don't know.
This is the first mission of its kind in over 50 years. The last time human beings traveled that far away from our home planet was during the Apollo missions back in the 1970s.
The 1970s. I mean, it is almost difficult to wrap your head around that gap in time. Think about how fundamentally the world has changed since the Apollo era.
Oh, it's completely unidentifiable. The smartphone sitting in my pocket right now, the device that many of you are probably using to listen to this deep dive, it possesses computing power that is vastly, unimaginably superior to the computers that guided those Apollo astronauts.
It's true. It's a completely different technological world.
We have mapped the human genome. We have connected the entire globe with the internet, but we haven't sent a human being back to the moon in half a century. Which leads me to the obvious question.
Why now?
Exactly. Why, after a 50-year pause, are we suddenly going back?
That is the crucial question to unpack. Because this is not just a nostalgia trip. The space agencies are not spending billions of dollars just to recreate a moment from the history books.
Or just to take a few updated high-definition photos of craters.
Right. Artemis II marks the definitive beginning of an entirely new era of lunar exploration. The long-term goal, according to the sources, is returning to the moon's surface to establish a permanent, sustained human presence.
Wait, let me stop you there. A permanent presence. Like a base camp.
Precisely like a base camp. But the moon itself is not the final destination.
It's not.
No, the strategy is to use the moon as a stepping stone.
Okay, a stepping stone to where?
To Mars. By building habitats, testing advanced life support systems, and refining deep space travel capabilities in lunar orbit and on the surface, humanity is actively preparing for the ultimate goal: sending future crewed missions to Mars.
Okay, I have to push back on this a little bit, because I hear this stepping stone to Mars argument a lot, and it always makes me wonder about the actual mechanics.
Sure. What's the hang-up?
Well, the moon has absolutely no atmosphere. It has a tiny fraction of the gravity of Mars. The environments are completely different.
They are very different, yes.
So how does testing life support systems in a lunar vacuum actually prepare us for the specific, unique environment of Mars? Aren't they totally different engineering challenges?
That is a highly perceptive question, and the answer lies in the concept of the gravity well and the realities of logistics.
Okay, let's break that down for our learners. What is a gravity well?
Think of Earth's gravity like a massive, deep valley.
Okay,
Right. To get anything out of that valley, like a rocket, fuel, food, water, heavy machinery, it requires an immense, almost incomprehensible amount of energy and money.
because gravity is pulling it all down.
Exactly. So if you want to go to Mars, you need a massive ship
Yeah.
with tons of supplies. If you try to launch all of that directly from Earth, the gravity well makes it nearly impossible. It's just too heavy.
Okay, I'm following.
But the moon has very little gravity. If we can learn to extract resources from the moon, like mining water ice from its poles to create rocket fuel, the moon basically becomes a gas station.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It is infinitely easier to launch a massive ship to Mars from the moon than it is from Earth.
That makes total sense. So you aren't just testing the spacesuits, you are testing the supply chain.
Exactly. You're testing the deep space supply chain. Furthermore, if a life support system fails on the moon, you are only a 3-day journey away from a potential rescue from Earth.
3 days.
Right. But if a system fails halfway to Mars, you are months away from help, and the crew is lost. The moon is the ultimate testing ground because it is hostile enough to prove the technology works, but close enough to offer a safety net.
A 3-day safety net. Just hearing that gives me goosebumps. Because even with that safety net, the danger is extraordinary.
It is extremely dangerous.
My personal reaction to this entire mission is just a deep sense of awe mixed with a healthy dose of terror. I mean, the months and months of intense, grueling physical and psychological training these astronauts go through.
And knowing that you will be strapped to a rocket containing millions of pounds of highly explosive fuel.
Yes. And the psychological toll of that isolation.
It is an environment completely and utterly hostile to human life. Space wants to kill you in a dozen different ways, from radiation to the vacuum to micrometeoroids. And the psychological isolation of looking back at Earth and seeing it small enough to cover with your thumb, that is something very few human minds have ever had to process.
Which perfectly sets up my first question for you, the listener. I want you to really think about this and put yourself in their shoes.
This is a great thought experiment.
It brings up a fascinating psychological question. If someone offered you a ticket on a mission like Artemis II tomorrow, if they said, you know, you have a seat, but you have to endure months of grueling, genuinely dangerous training, and there is a real chance you might not come back.
What would your answer be?
Exactly. Would your answer be an immediate yes because the adventure is worth the risk? Or would it be a hard no because the danger is just too high? I want you to pause and comment yes or no right now.
I suspect we will see a very stark divide in the comments on that one.
Oh, for sure.
It represents the classic human divide, the overwhelming romance of exploration versus the terrifying, cold reality of survival.
Oh, I am a yes in a heartbeat. Put me in the centrifuge. Sign me up.
Really? You go.
Without a doubt. But I know plenty of people who wouldn't even walk onto the launch pad, let alone get in the capsule.
I might be one of those people.
But speaking of isolation in the sky, let's transition from the absolute vacuum of space back inside Earth's atmosphere.
Back to the clouds.
Right. Because it's fascinating that while our technology allows astronauts to venture into total isolation down here on commercial airplanes, We are desperately fighting to eliminate isolation entirely.
You are talking about the battle for in-flight connectivity.
Yes. While astronauts are preparing to be hundreds of thousands of miles away from any cell tower, airlines are fighting a massive battle to keep us connected while we fly.
It's a huge industry shift right now.
Our sources detail how major airlines are currently investing billions of dollars in high-speed satellite internet for their passengers. They are actively, aggressively moving away from what the sources call that famously slow, agonizing 2005-era airplane Wi-Fi.
We all know that specific flavor of frustration.
Oh, it's the worst.
You paid $20 for the Wi-Fi on a cross-country flight, and you sit there watching the little loading circle spin for 5 minutes just to send a single text-only email.
Practically useless.
Exactly. It was practically useless for anything other than the most basic communication.
But the shift happening right now is a massive leap forward in capability. Airlines are completely overhauling their systems.
They are. The sources point out that airlines are working with advanced satellite networks and implementing this new technology across their entire fleets.
So what's the end goal for the passenger?
The ultimate goal is that passengers will be able to stream high-definition movies, join video conference calls, and work online completely seamlessly, exactly as if they were sitting on their couch at home.
Or in a high-speed coffee shop. So we have to pause and look at the how here. Because earlier we talked about the mechanics of going to the moon. Let's talk about the mechanics of this.
The engineering behind it is fascinating.
How exactly does a satellite floating in space beam a streaming movie to a metal tube flying through the sky at 500 miles per hour? Like, why was it so bad before and why is it getting so good now?
To understand how this new Wi-Fi works, you have to look at the architecture of the satellites. The old 2005-era Wi-Fi relied on geostationary satellites.
Geostationary, what does that mean?
These were massive, incredibly expensive satellites parked way out in space, about 22,000 miles above the Earth. They orbit at the exact same speed the Earth turns, so they stay over one spot.
22,000 miles? That is a massive distance for a signal to travel.
Exactly. So when you clicked a link on your laptop on the plane, the signal had to travel up from the plane 22,000 miles into space to the satellite, then bounce 22,000 miles back down to a server on the ground.
Wow.
And then do the whole trip in reverse just to load the web page. That distance creates a massive delay, which we call latency.
Latency. That's a great vocabulary word for our learners. It basically means the lag time, right?
Right. Plus, hundreds of planes were all trying to use the same satellite at the same time. It was like trying to drink a thick milkshake through a tiny, miles-long straw.
Okay, that makes perfect sense as to why it was so terrible. So what is the new method? How are they fixing the milkshake straw problem?
Instead of using a few satellites parked incredibly high up, companies are now launching thousands of what are called low Earth orbit satellites, or LEOs.
Low Earth orbit, so they are much closer.
Much closer. These satellites are much smaller, and they orbit only a few hundred miles up.
Like a massive net wrapping around the planet.
Exactly like a net. So now, the distance the signal has to travel is drastically shorter, which eliminates the delay.
And because there are thousands of these satellites, I assume the connection is handed off.
Right. The airplane's antenna simply passes the signal from one satellite to the next as the plane flies across the sky, like a cosmic daisy chain. It is a brilliant feat of engineering. We are essentially eliminating the physical barriers to digital connection.
It is a technological marvel, without question. But I have to push back on this culturally.
Okay, push back.
I have to look at the human element here. If we compare the absolute profound isolation of those Artemis astronauts to the modern airplane passenger, are we losing something fundamentally important here?
How do you mean? What is the loss?
Well, think about it. For the last 20 years, an airplane has been one of the very last true sanctuaries of being offline.
That's true. You were completely unreachable.
It was a socially acceptable excuse to disappear. Sometimes it is incredibly liberating to be in a physical space where absolutely no one expects you to answer an email or reply to a work message.
You are physically trapped in a metal tube, and therefore you are forced to just read a book or look out the window at the clouds and think.
Yes, you are arguing for the psychological value of forced disconnection.
Right, because when the technology exists to be connected absolutely everywhere, the social and professional expectation becomes that you will be connected everywhere.
Exactly. If the Wi-Fi on the plane is flawless, your boss knows that you can answer that urgent email from 30,000 feet. The boundary between your personal time and the rest of the world is completely erased. The sanctuary is gone.
That is the double-edged sword of connectivity. We build these magnificent tools to overcome physical limits to conquer the sky, but then we have to navigate how those tools change our behavior.
And our stress levels.
Right. And our expectations of each other.
Yeah.
It shifts the burden from a technological limit to a boundary of personal discipline. You now have to actively choose to ignore the email, which is much harder than simply not receiving it.
Which brings me to my next question for you, the listener. I want to know where you stand on this cultural shift.
This is a really relatable one.
When you are flying on a long trip, do you prefer having blazing fast internet so you can stay connected, get work done, and stay entertained? Or do you secretly enjoy that forced digital break where the world just has to wait for a few hours?
Let us know in the comments. Are you team fast Wi-Fi or are you team leave me alone?
It is a perfect micro example of our relationship with technology.
And it actually provides a perfect transition into our next major theme.
How so?
Because it's fascinating that while our tech allows us to conquer the physical boundaries of the sky with satellite Wi-Fi, it is simultaneously erasing physical boundaries down on the ground.
Oh, you mean with where people live and work?
Exactly. You no longer need to be physically tethered to a specific location to participate in the global economy.
I see exactly where you were going. This brings us to section 2, which is the massive decentralization of tech. Because the ability to be connected anywhere mirrors a massive structural shift happening in the business world right now.
The companies that create this unimaginably powerful technology, the very technology we've been discussing, they no longer feel tied to one physical location.
For decades, there was a very strict geographic rule in the tech industry.
If you wanted to build software, if you wanted to grow a massive startup, or if you wanted to get funding from major investors, there was really only one place on Earth you had to be.
Silicon Valley in California. It was the undisputed, absolute epicenter of the global tech ecosystem.
It was almost a mythical place.
Right.
But our sources highlight a major historic exodus over the last few years.
Startups, mid-sized companies, and even some of the largest, most established tech firms in the world are packing up their offices. They are moving their headquarters out of California entirely.
They are relocating in droves to states like Texas and Florida. And to understand why this is happening, we have to look at how the physical realities of living in that area finally collided with the digital tools these companies were building.
So let's break down those physical realities. Why are they leaving the tech capital of the world?
It is a combination of harsh economic factors and a shift in workplace culture. The sources cite two primary economic drivers. First, lower corporate taxes in these destination states.
Which is obviously a massive draw for companies looking to maximize profit.
Of course. And crucially, the second factor is lower housing costs for their employees.
The housing cost issue is massive. The cost of living in Silicon Valley and the San Francisco Bay Area in general had just become astronomically high.
We are talking about small, basic homes costing millions of dollars. Even software engineers making very high salaries were struggling to afford a normal, middle-class standard of living.
Exactly. The geographic concentration of wealth pushed the physical costs of the land to a breaking point.
But high costs alone weren't enough to trigger the exodus. People have been complaining about rent for years.
Right, so what was the spark?
The true catalyst, the mechanism that finally allowed this movement to happen, was the sudden global impact of remote work.
Ah, because of the pandemic.
Yes, the pandemic forced a grand experiment in remote work. And what these companies realized was that their teams could remain highly productive while being completely distributed across different cities, states, or even countries.
The absolute necessity of being physically present in that one incredibly expensive valley just evaporated overnight.
The digital tools, like the high-speed internet we just talked about, they finally matured enough to replace the physical office.
So the tech ecosystem is spreading out, the map is shifting, and on a personal level, my reaction to this is just thinking about the absolute dream scenario of remote work.
It is very appealing.
The idea that you could work for a cutting-edge, high-paying tech company, but instead of fighting gridlock traffic in a massive, expensive city, you could do your job from a quiet beach or a really cozy small town up in the mountains.
It completely separates the concept of work from the concept of geography.
It does, but we also have to look at the secondary consequences of this movement, because it isn't just a simple win-win scenario, is it?
No, it's not. Every shift in a complex system creates winners and losers.
What do you mean? Like, doesn't this just create more diverse opportunities? Instead of all the wealth and innovation being concentrated in one valley in California, it starts to bloom in different regions across the country.
It does diffuse the economic impact, yes, bringing new, high-paying jobs to cities in Texas and Florida, but it also acts as a double-edged sword for those local economies.
I see. You were talking about gentrification and local displacement.
Exactly. Imagine a quiet, relatively affordable city in Texas. Suddenly, thousands of remote tech workers arrive, bringing their highly elevated California salaries with them.
And they can afford to pay top dollar for housing.
Right, which immediately drives up the cost of real estate.
Hmm.
The local residents, who are still making the local median wage, suddenly find themselves priced out of their own neighborhoods.
That's a serious problem.
Some economists call this a form of digital feudalism.
Digital feudalism. Wow.
Yeah.
What does that mean for our learners?
Feudalism was the medieval system where lords owned the land and peasants worked it. In this modern digital version, highly paid remote workers essentially colonize affordable areas, unintentionally fracturing the local economic balance.
That is a fascinating and somewhat dark perspective.
Yeah.
The technology removes the border for the worker, but creates a massive economic wall for the local resident. It really complicates the dream of remote work.
It definitely does.
Well, listener, I want to know your dream scenario, setting aside the economic impacts for a moment. If your job went 100% remote tomorrow and you could live and work literally anywhere in the world, where would you choose?
Big city, beach, or mountains?
Exactly. Would you pick a bustling, vibrant, big city, a quiet, warm beach, or somewhere secluded up in the mountains? Drop your absolute dream location in the comments right now.
It is always fascinating to see how people balance the desire for nature with the desire for culture and convenience.
Definitely. Now, here is where our narrative takes a really interesting turn, because while the physical footprint of these tech companies is spreading out, while the geography is decentralizing, we are seeing the exact opposite happen with the capabilities of the technology they are actually building.
The power of the tools themselves is becoming highly centralized and unimaginably potent.
Yes. Which brings us to the rise of AI, artificial intelligence. Specifically, our sources focus heavily on the rapid advancement of tools that generate hyper-realistic images.
And this isn't just a fun novelty anymore. This is a fundamental shift in how we perceive reality.
This is perhaps where the tension between human progress and physical reality becomes the sharpest. These generative AI systems have evolved at a staggering pace.
They have reached a point where they can create incredibly realistic, high-resolution images of people, places, and events that have never actually existed in the real world.
I have seen some of these images online, and it is genuinely mind-blowing.
It's hard to tell what's real anymore.
You look at a portrait of a person generated by AI, the lighting perfectly reflects off their skin, you can see the individual pores, the eyes look completely alive. There are tiny imperfections that make it look so human, but it's not real. There is no human, it's just math.
It is mathematics operating at a scale that the human brain struggles to comprehend.
So for our B2 learners who might not be software engineers, how does this actually work? We aren't just talking about a computer cutting and pasting different faces together, right? How does an AI create a totally new face out of nothing? Let's break down the mechanics here.
That is a great distinction to make. It is not a collage. Most of the cutting-edge image generators today use something called a diffusion model.
Okay, what is a diffusion model?
Think of it like a sculptor working with a block of pure, chaotic static. Like the static you used to see on an old television set when it lost the signal.
Oh, right. Just fuzzy black and white noise on the screen.
Exactly. The AI system has previously studied billions and billions of real photographs of human faces, landscapes, lighting conditions, and textures. It understands the fundamental mathematical patterns of what a face looks like.
Okay, so it has a massive mental library of patterns.
Right, so when you type in a prompt, like a photo of an old man smiling in the rain, the AI starts with a block of that pure visual static.
And then what does it do with the static?
Then, step by microscopic step, it begins to mathematically remove the noise. It chisels away the static, refining the pixels based on those patterns it learned, until a hyper-realistic face slowly emerges from the chaos.
That is incredible.
It isn't finding a face on the internet. It is mathematically hallucinating a face based on the rules of reality it was taught.
Mathematically hallucinating. What an incredibly evocative phrase. It is sculpting reality out of static. And while that is an undeniable technological triumph, our sources point out that it is creating a massive, terrifying ethical and regulatory clash.
Because the potential for misuse is staggering.
Right.
As the sources point out, critics and ethicists are raising massive alarms about how these systems are already being used in the wild. We are seeing the rapid creation and spread of deepfakes.
For our learners, a deepfake is a piece of synthetic media, like a fake image, video, or audio clip that is manipulated to look incredibly real.
Yes. And we're seeing these deepfakes used to create highly damaging fake images of celebrities, politicians, public figures, and increasingly everyday private citizens.
It is being used for political manipulation, financial fraud, and personal harassment.
So what does this all mean for us as a society? We are rapidly entering a world where the old saying, seeing is believing, is completely dead.
We can no longer fundamentally trust our own eyes when we look at a screen.
That is the core societal threat. The foundation of a shared reality is crumbling. And the issue is compounded by the speed of the technology.
It is moving so fast.
The tech is moving incredibly fast. It is evolving and improving by the week. But the laws, the regulations, and the judicial systems required to manage it, to protect people's identities, and the concept of truth itself are moving at a glacial pace.
It is the ultimate example of the genie being out of the bottle. And for our B2 learners, when we use the idiom, the genie is out of the bottle, it means that a powerful force or a new technology has been released into the world, and it is absolutely impossible to put it back or reverse it. You cannot uninvent diffusion models.
And this ties perfectly back to our discussion about the tech companies moving out of Silicon Valley.
Oh, so?
Once these AI tools are out there on the internet, open source, decentralized, and accessible to anyone with a laptop anywhere in the world, it becomes incredibly difficult, perhaps impossible, for any single government to control or regulate them.
Because I was going to push back and say, why don't governments just pass a law banning deepfakes?
Because of jurisdiction. A government can pass a law making it illegal to generate deepfakes within their borders. But what happens when the software is hosted on a server in a country with no such laws, and the user is operating through an anonymous network?
Ah, I see.
How do you govern a technology that moves at the speed of light across a borderless digital landscape when our legal systems still move at the speed of paper within strict physical borders?
It's a massive, heavy question. And listener, I want to hear your personal take on this because this affects all of us.
We really want your thoughts on this one.
Do you think this AI technology is moving too fast for society to handle? Or do you think this kind of rapid disruptive innovation is just a normal, necessary part of human progress?
Are you primarily excited about the possibilities, or are you feeling nervous?
Tell us in the comments. Are you excited or nervous?
It is entirely valid and perhaps the most logical position to feel both simultaneously.
It really is.
The potential for AI to accelerate medical breakthroughs, design new materials, and unlock incredible creative tools is immense. But the potential for mass misinformation and the erosion of truth is equally staggering.
It is the ultimate tightrope walk. And this rapid technological boom, whether we are talking about AI generating new realities or satellite internet blanketing the Earth or the shifting geography of tech hubs, it isn't just changing where people work or what fake images they see online.
It is fundamentally, radically altering the structure of the global economy.
Which brings us to Section 3, the cost of progress. We have to ask the critical questions. Who actually benefits from this massive acceleration, and what is the physical toll it takes on our world?
Let's look at the wealth aspect first, because according to our sources, the financial landscape is changing just as dramatically as the technological one.
The data shows that the number of billionaires in the United States has increased dramatically over the last decade. And it isn't just that there are more individuals crossing that threshold. Their total wealth is growing at an extremely fast, unprecedented rate.
And the sources are very clear on the primary drivers of this wealth explosion. It is largely fueled by the massive exponential growth of the very tech industry we have been discussing, combined with steadily, aggressively rising stock markets.
Now, listener, this is a topic that generates an enormous amount of heat. It is a very emotional, highly polarized debate online, in the news, and in politics.
Extremely polarized.
And our goal here on the deep dive is to look at this strictly impartially. We want to break down exactly what the different perspectives are without taking a side so you can understand the mechanics of the debate.
It is essential to understand both arguments to grasp the current political climate. Let's look at what we will call Side A.
Okay, what does Side A believe?
On Side A, you have economists, investors, and supporters of the current system who argue that this extreme concentration of wealth is simply the natural byproduct of immense value creation.
Okay, explain value creation in this context.
The argument is that wealth is not a fixed pie. where one person taking a slice means there is less for everyone else. Side A argues that these billionaires, the founders of these massive tech and logistics companies, are creating entirely new pies.
So they are expanding the economy.
Right. They argue that these individuals take massive financial risks, known as risk capital, to build the tools, the software, and the infrastructure that we all rely on every day.
So in this view, the wealth is a reward.
Exactly. Side A argues that in the process of building these companies, they generate hundreds of thousands of jobs, fuel countless smaller businesses, and drive the very innovation that pushes society forward.
Therefore, the billions of dollars in stock they hold is a justified reward for their extreme contribution to the efficiency and progress of the global economy.
That's the argument for Side A.
Okay, so that is Side A, extreme wealth as a necessary driver and reward for extreme progress. But then we have Side B, and Side B looks at the exact same data and comes to a completely different conclusion.
Critics of this trend argue that the current economic system is fundamentally flawed. They argue that it has stopped rewarding labor and started exclusively rewarding capital.
Right. To understand Side B, we have to look at how this modern wealth is actually generated, because very few billionaires earn a massive traditional salary, right?
Exactly. Their wealth is tied to asset appreciation, meaning the value of the stock they own in their companies goes up.
Right. If I own 1,000,000 shares of a tech company and the share price goes up by $100, my wealth increases by $100 million, even though I didn't actually produce $100 million worth of physical goods that day.
That is the core of the Side B critique. They point to a phenomenon called asset inflation.
Asset inflation, what's that?
When central banks pump money into the economy, much of it flows into the stock market, driving up the prices of assets like stocks and real estate. Side B argues that this system disproportionately and unfairly benefits the small percentage of people who already own those large investments.
The rich get richer, not necessarily because they worked harder, but because the system is designed to inflate the assets they already hold.
Exactly. The critique here is that the wealth gap, the distance between the richest individuals and the poorest, is growing at an unsustainable rate.
And that gap causes problems.
Side B argues that when the stock market becomes completely disconnected from the reality of the working class, it creates deep structural inequality. And that inequality breeds political instability, limits social mobility, and ultimately harms society as a whole.
It is a massive clash of philosophies, the tension between the necessity of innovation and the demand for equality.
It's one of the biggest debates of our time.
So, listener, this brings me to a really fun thought experiment for you. If you were handed a magic wand today, and you had the absolute power to change one economic rule in your country right now to improve the system, what would you fix first?
That's a great question.
Would you radically change the tax system? Would you implement strict new housing policies to make homes affordable? Maybe tackle the crushing cost of higher education? Let us know what your absolute first priority would be in the comments.
It is a profound question to consider because economics is an ecosystem. Every single rule you touch, every tax you raise or lower, creates a massive ripple effect across the entire system.
And speaking of physical ecosystems, this economic boom we are talking about does not exist in a vacuum or merely on a spreadsheet.
No, it has real-world impacts.
The massive growth of industry, the proliferation of global commerce, the energy required to power those massive AI data centers, all of this has a direct, measurable physical impact on the Earth itself.
Which leads us directly and parallel to the economic debate into the massive rise of global climate activism. Because while the tech companies are focused on the digital sky, millions of people are intensely focused on the physical ground.
And our sources highlight a very specific, unique characteristic of this modern climate movement. It is overwhelmingly youth-led.
It is a visceral, generational response to the physical changes happening to the environment they are going to inherit.
The generational aspect is the defining feature here. The sources specifically point to figures like Greta Thunberg, who served as the primary catalyst for this current wave of global action.
For those who might not know the history or who have forgotten how recently this started, it is incredible to trace the origin.
It didn't start with a massive organized political machine, did it?
No, it began with just a single teenager holding a handmade sign, conducting a student strike outside a parliament building in Sweden.
One person.
One person. And that single physical act of defiance resonated so deeply with younger generations that it rapidly cascaded into massive, coordinated global protests. We're talking about millions of students walking out of schools across Europe, the US, Asia, and far beyond.
It is a testament to the power of decentralized communication. The very tech tools we've been discussing being used to organize physical, real-world action.
But what we are seeing in response to this activism is intense, deeply entrenched political gridlock surrounding actual climate policy.
Because, once again, we have a massive debate with two very distinct sides. And just like with the wealth gap, it is vital to understand both arguments neutrally to grasp why global policy is moving so slowly. Break it down for us.
Let's look at the two opposing forces. On one side, driven by these massive activist movements and scientific consensus regarding warming targets, you have a strong push for aggressive, immediate climate action.
The transition now argument?
Yes. This side argues that we are rapidly approaching physical planetary boundaries. They argue that the existential threat of a changing climate demands immediate radical changes to how we produce energy, manufacture goods, and consume resources.
They advocate for a rapid phase-out of fossil fuels and massive government intervention to build green infrastructure.
Right, arguing that the long-term cost of inaction will be catastrophic, both environmentally and economically.
Okay, so that is the push for rapid transition. But then we have the opposing side of the policy debate.
Correct. On the other hand, you have widespread, deeply rooted, and very real worries about the immediate economic consequences of taking those rapid actions.
Right.
Critics of aggressive climate policy argue that our entire global civilization, the food supply chain, heating, transportation, is currently entirely dependent on fossil fuels.
The mechanics of the energy grid?
Exactly. They argue that moving too fast to dismantle that infrastructure before reliable, scalable alternatives are fully in place could trigger a massive economic shock.
They point out that aggressive carbon taxes or rapid regulatory changes could destroy established industries, eliminate millions of jobs, and cause the price of basic necessities like food and electricity to skyrocket.
And their core argument is that those price spikes will disproportionately hurt the working class and vulnerable populations who cannot afford to pay double for their heating bill just to meet a climate target.
Precisely. It is a debate about the timeline of the transition and who bears the immediate cost of that transition.
It is an incredibly difficult balancing act.
And what strikes me most here as we look at this through the lens of our deep dives theme today is the intense generational tension.
How do you mean?
You have these younger generations who are the ones out in the streets, holding the signs, terrified about the climate, but they are also the exact same generation that is inheriting this rapidly widening wealth gap we just talked about.
That's a very sharp point.
They are looking at a future where the physical Earth is under severe stress and the economic rules feel entirely stacked against them.
They are the generation inheriting the bill for the rapid progress of the previous 50 years.
Which makes me want to push back on the entire fundamental narrative of what we call progress. Think about everything we have discussed today.
Okay.
The AI image generators require massive data centers that consume enormous amounts of electricity and water for cooling. The satellite internet requires launching thousands of rockets into the atmosphere. The space missions require millions of pounds of propellant.
It's all incredibly resource intensive.
Right. So is it even possible to have the kind of rapid, explosive technological innovation we crave without causing severe, perhaps irreversible environmental consequences? Are tech and nature fundamentally a zero-sum game?
That question right there is the defining engineering, philosophical, and social challenge of our current era. Can humanity successfully decouple economic and technological progress from environmental degradation? We don't have the answer yet.
And that leads to the question of what role we actually play as individuals in all of this. Listener, this is a big one, and it is something people argue about all the time. I want your honest opinion.
This is where the rubber meets the road.
When you look at the sheer scale of global emissions and global industry, do you think that your individual daily actions, things like meticulously recycling your plastic, choosing to take public transit instead of driving, or taking shorter showers, do you think those personal choices make a real measurable difference?
Or do you believe that the concept of a personal carbon footprint is just a distraction?
Exactly, and that the responsibility for fixing the climate rests almost entirely on the shoulders of massive governments and the 100 largest global corporations. Tell us where you think the real power to change things actually lies, the individual citizen or the giant corporation?
Is a fascinating debate about scale and leverage. It is the conflict between individual virtue and the absolute necessity of systemic structural change.
Exactly, and The truth is, all of these massive issues we have discussed, whether it is overhauling global energy policy, addressing deep economic inequality, or regulating advanced AI, none of these things can be solved in a vacuum.
They are all entirely dependent on a foundation of something very fragile.
They are dependent on global stability. Which brings us to our fourth and final section, the global stage.
We have to come down from the digital clouds, step away from the abstract economic debates, and look at the harsh, real-world terrestrial conflicts happening right now.
Because without a stable map, all the progress we've discussed grinds to a halt.
That is the harsh reality. Geopolitics is the physical board on which all of these other games are played. If the board is shaking, nothing else functions correctly.
Our sources point us directly to the rising, highly complex tensions currently unfolding in the Middle East. Specifically, they outline a very intricate, high-stakes web of actions and reactions involving the United States, Israel, and Iran.
The situation, as impartially outlined by our sources, is multifaceted and deeply historical. But looking at the current moment, we are seeing a dangerous combination of direct military posturing, proxy actions, and highly sensitive, fraught discussions regarding nuclear capabilities and programs.
And again, remaining entirely objective and focusing purely on the mechanics of global relations here, it is important to understand how these events function on the global stage.
Right, because if you only read the front page headlines, you only see the conflict. You see the military actions and the threats.
But the sources also note a crucial parallel element. Simultaneously, behind the scenes, there are deep, intense diplomatic negotiations happening through back channels.
It is what diplomats call a dual-track approach. One track is the public display of strength and readiness for conflict. The other track is the quiet, desperate attempt to find a negotiated off-ramp to prevent that conflict.
I always try to explain global diplomacy using the analogy of a duck swimming across a pond.
I love this analogy.
If you look at the duck from above the water, it looks incredibly calm, smooth, and peaceful, just gliding along. That is the diplomatic track. That is the politicians shaking hands for the cameras and having quiet meetings in Geneva.
But if you look underwater...
Right. Beneath the surface, the duck's feet are kicking furiously, violently splashing around just to keep the bird moving forward and stay afloat. That furious kicking is the military preparation, the positioning of aircraft carriers, the stockpiling of weapons, the cyber warfare.
It highlights this really strange, almost contradictory duality of nations.
Yeah.
Countries formally and politely talking about peace while simultaneously aggressively preparing for war.
The duck analogy perfectly captures the necessary hypocrisy of statecraft. The surface narrative of peace requires the underlying mechanics of power and threat to sustain it.
But it is also crucial for our listeners to understand why this specific region matters so much to the rest of the themes we've discussed today. Why does regional conflict in the Middle East refuse to stay regional?
It's the ripple effect, right?
Exactly. The Middle East is the geographic and economic choke point of the world. Historically, and we are seeing it play out currently, tensions in this specific region have a direct, immediate, and profound impact on global oil prices.
Right, because a significant percentage of the world's energy supply flows through very narrow straits in this region. If those straits are threatened, the cost of oil skyrockets globally.
And this connects absolutely everything back together. Let's trace the web.
Okay, let's trace it.
If geopolitical tension causes oil prices to spike, that immediately drives up the cost of manufacturing and shipping globally. That causes massive inflation.
And that inflation impacts the global economy, which directly widens the wealth gap we discussed in Section 3, as the working class struggles to buy basic goods.
Exactly. Furthermore, when oil prices spike and economies panic, governments often abandon their long-term climate pledges and fall back on burning cheaper, dirtier fuels just to keep the lights on, which completely derails the climate activism goals.
It is all one massive, fragile, interconnected web.
You've mapped it out perfectly. Geopolitics dictates energy. Energy dictates economics. Economics dictates the capacity for technological progress.
Furthermore, these regional conflicts test and strain the complex web of international alliances, like NATO, the UN, various defense pacts.
They dictate the overall state of global security. A disruption in that specific part of the world is, quite literally, a disruption everywhere.
It really makes you step back and wonder about the overall state of the world we were living in today. Because when you look at the news, it feels overwhelming.
It's a lot to process.
And listener, that leads me to my final question for you to answer in the comments today. I want your perspective on the era we are living through.
With everything we see on our screens, Do you truly think that global conflicts and crises are actually becoming more common and more severe in our modern era?
Or do you think the world has always been this chaotic, this violent, and this tense, and the only difference is that we just hear about it constantly now because of the internet, social media, and a relentless 24/7 news cycle?
Basically, are there actually more conflicts happening today, or do we just have more cameras pointing at them? Let us know what you think.
It is a profound question of perspective. Human perception is so heavily skewed by the medium through which we receive our information.
If you are bombarded with anxiety-inducing alerts on your phone every 10 minutes, the world feels like it is ending, even if statistically, by many metrics, it is the most peaceful era in human history.
It is the ultimate paradox of the information age. We know everything, which means we worry about everything. And wow, taking a breath here, we have covered a truly massive amount of ground today.
We truly have. We have traversed the entire spectrum of the human experience right now, from the stars to the streets.
Let's do a quick recap of this incredible journey to tie it all together. We started by looking at the ultimate physical frontiers, the isolating, historic, and incredibly dangerous 10-day journey planned for the Artemis second astronauts as they head back to the moon for the first time in 50 years.
Testing the deep space supply chain for Mars.
Then we dropped back into the atmosphere to look at how airlines are upgrading from that agonizing 2005-era Wi-Fi to high-speed LEO satellite internet, conquering the sky but perhaps destroying our last sanctuary of disconnection.
From there, we examined the shifting, decentralizing map of the tech world. We noted how major companies are leaving the traditional, expensive hub of Silicon Valley for places like Texas and Florida.
Driven by taxes, housing costs, and the remote work revolution, while also looking at the gentrification those moves cause.
While at the same exact time, the AI technology they are creating is becoming incredibly centralized and powerful.
We broke down how diffusion models generate hyperrealistic images out of static, raising massive ethical questions about deepfakes and the terrifyingly slow pace of government regulation.
We then tackled the intense, two-sided, highly polarized debates over the massive growth of billionaire wealth, looking at asset inflation versus risk capital.
And we contrasted that wealth boom with the youth-led global climate activism movement sparked by a single student protest, highlighting the gridlock between rapid environmental transition and severe economic shock.
And finally, we grounded all of those sweeping digital, economic, and environmental trends in the stark physical reality of global geopolitics.
We examined how the complex, dual-track diplomatic and military tensions between the U.S., Israel, and Iran ripple out to dictate global oil prices, which in turn affect the entire interconnected web we just summarized.
It is a lot to take in. It is a heavy, complex world.
But for all of you B2 English learners out there, practicing your language skills with us today, you did an absolutely amazing job following along with these massive concepts. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with this deep dive.
We genuinely hope that the clear language, the analogies, and the deep context we provided today helped you not only practice your listening skills, but also gain a much deeper, more nuanced understanding of these complex global forces.
Absolutely. Remember to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a deep dive with us. Drop all your answers to today's questions down in the comments. We read every single one. And keep practicing a little bit of English every single day.
Before we go, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. Something that combines all the things we touched on today.
Ooh, all right, lay it on us.
We talked extensively about human progress, the generation of extreme wealth, terrestrial conflict, and our imminent return to the moon. So, imagine the future, when humanity eventually sets up that permanent base on the lunar surface for the Artemis missions, whose rules will actually apply.
Oh, wow.
Will we simply pack up and bring our terrestrial conflicts, our vast wealth gaps, and our bitter political debates with us into the vacuum of space? Or will the harsh reality of the moon force us to cooperate, offering humanity a totally clean slate?
Oh man, that is a powerful question. Does the messy, tearing map of Earth just stretch all the way to the moon, bringing our unmoored reality with it? Or do we finally get to draw a completely new one? That is definitely something for you to chew on until next time. Thanks for listening, everyone. Keep looking up.